Today we are going to talk about drawing a still life with pencil from life. Funnily enough, because this is an online video, I'm not going to be actually drawing stuff from life, but all of the tips that I cover today should get you started with drawing your own still life that you've hopefully set up at home. So before we begin, just some quick words on pencils. I've got here my sweet pencil set, and I've got it organized from lightest to darkest. And right in the middle, we've got the HB and B pencils. Just a quick overview. The HB pencil is, you can think of it as sort of a neutral. It'll give you a medium dark mark, and it's what you use every day, so you're used to this guy. This is your everyday pencil, and it combines qualities of all of the B and the H pencils. Now, if you go in either direction, the pencils become more extreme. The darkest pencil that you're typically going to find, they do go darker, is going to be a 6B, so that's that number right there. And I kind of like to memorize it by thinking of B as black, as in dark. So the darker it is, the higher the number will be. So a 6B is going to be blacker or darker than, say, a 2B, but a 2B will be darker than an HB. So as it moves away from the HB and the number goes higher, the more extreme it'll be. On the other end of the spectrum, we have H pencils. The lightest, oops, I almost messed up there. The lightest that I have here is a 6H, and I like to think of the H as in hard, because the more H it is, the less it's likely it's going to be to sort of like crumble or give you a really dark mark. It'll be a harder lead, which means that it will hold its point for a much longer time, and it'll give you a much lighter line. So when we are starting out our drawings, I often recommend starting with a pencil on the H side, because it'll give you a lighter line, and you can assume that the first lines that you're going to make, they're not going to be your final lines. They're just your introductory lines, kind of mapping stuff out, and a lighter line will be easier to erase or draw over. Now, that being said, the H pencils are harder, so if you press down, you will indent your paper, and it'll be super hard to erase because you'll actually damage your paper by pressing down too hard. So if you have a very heavy hand, you might want to stay with just like a H, not going into the numbers, so it's just a little bit less smudgy than your HB. Or you might want to just use a mechanical pencil, just a regular one, press down really lightly as you can. However, if you're sort of run-of-the-mill kind of weight when you draw, I recommend beginning your drawing with one of the H's. So for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and use a 2H. And I'm using a 2H because I want a light line, but I don't want it so light that you can't see it. So let's pretend that I'm just starting out my still life drawing, and I'm pretending that I'm you, and I've got my still life set up, and it's this image that I have down here below. I chose a really complicated image, and because I can't show you my huge big drawing pad on this, I'm just going to draw out, and we're going to pretend that this is my 18 by 24 sheet of paper, and I'm starting it out with my 2H pencil in this. So I would look through my viewfinder, the ones that we made in class this week that looked like this, and I would hold it up to my eye, and I would measure to find, I would also draw the lines on the big sheet of paper, and I would measure to see what lines up close to the middle, and in the 4 quadrants where things lie. So I kind of use this as a cheat sheet for how to figure out where stuff is at. And I'm going to do that actually right now by just laying this onto here. I laid this directly onto that tiny little image, and I figured some stuff out. So I'm going to just kind of start lightly mapping out different shapes. And you can see that when I'm mapping them out, I'm thinking about like how much space they take in the composition. And I'm starting by drawing not like just their outlines or basic shapes. I'm just drawing basic shapes and not their outlines. So like that flower kind of looks like a circle to me. That watch looks like there's one circle and then there's another circle. There's kind of a circular item in here. I'm gonna go back to that letter there in the middle, sort of like an item like this. This is the feather. And the skull, at first I'm gonna start by just drawing it as a circle. And then later I can go in and start mapping out, you know, like the actual shapes of the skull. And here's the walnut. So you can see that it kind of looks like a big old mess, but that's what you want. Because if I had just drawn, let's say for example, I had just drawn one tiny line, like used one line, it's really, I'm trying to draw the skull right now. It's actually really a lot harder to get something to look right with just a single line outlining it. Like stuff is more likely than not going to be in the right place when you draw it. Like that doesn't, I draw this and then I'm like, oh, things aren't lining up correctly. If I had started with a bunch of loose lines, as I did here, this gives you more to work with, and you can sort of think about like carving back into it and then finding alignments and finding different centers and stuff like that, and more on that in a second. So in other words, when you're first starting out your drawing, I want you to be as loose as possible, using a ton of lines. You can build up more and more lines. If something you realize it's in the wrong place, just erase it, add a bunch more lines, make it look like kind of crazy and messy. That is going to be your key for starting things out in such a way that when it ends, it's all going to align. So let's say you got everything kind of more or less figured out. Now it's time to go into objects and draw them each out so that they begin to feel more stable and whole. What I've done in Blackboard is I've got two little still life setups, just like silly little things that I set up in my house, and one of them has two objects that contain circles, which is this one here, and the other one has two objects that contain squares. This is a gross oversimplification, but this is how I think of things in my head. I look at something and I think, is it more of a circle or more of a square? I mean, it's going to combine some of them, but I'm going to say for this one here, which is chapstick and a mug, I'm gonna say the circle defines these two objects because they're so round. So, some tips on how to draw stuff that's got circles in it. Well, first, I'm calling this an X-ray still life, like meaning that you want to draw it as though it is see-through, because if you draw something so that it's see-through, you can be sure that every part of it aligns. What I mean by that is, when I draw the mug, I'm going to draw a bunch of invisible lines in order to build it up. The first line that I'm going to draw is actually just going to draw a line up and down, and you could use a ruler to do this if you want. But this line up and down, I'm going to say is the middle of my cup. Now that line doesn't exist in real life, however, it's going to help me align all of the circles I need to draw this mug and make it look a lot more real. This circle that is the middle of the mug, I can assume that if it's the middle, it's going to go straight through the open mouth of the mug. So I'm looking at the mug and I'm trying to draw an oval that is the same shape on both sides, and that is cut exactly in half by this line, which is my center line. From this center line, I can now draw the two lines down. I'm just dropping them down from the edges here of that oval that I've just drawn. And I can assume that these are going to be the two sides of the mug, and I am keeping an eye on the center line, being sure that they are equidistant and parallel so that things don't start getting real wonky real fast. Now I'm looking at the proportions of the mug, and it's kind of a short little mug. So I'm going to say the bottom of it is going to be somewhere here. Now when I draw the bottom, I'm drawing another see-through circle, and I'm trying to make it a similar circle, I'm saying circle, but oval in this case, a similar oval to up top. And I'm even going to draw a line that goes through it. These are all imaginary lines, but what I'm trying to measure here is that it's not getting all wonky like this. You want it to be a right angle so that it looks like it's sitting. So the right angle here is going to bisect the corners of that oval that you've just drawn. Now I'm going to go ahead, and before I get too involved in my mug, I want to get everything all lined up. So I'm going to go ahead and draw this chapstick here. So I see that it's also a circular shape, and you can see what I'm doing is I'm just drawing a ton of circles because it overlaps my mug. I'm drawing a circle through the middle of it. I'm drawing these two sides. Shift up my paper a little bit there. And then I'm going to go ahead and draw another circle. And that will be going to be the bottom of it. You can see that when I draw these lines, it's really hard to draw a convincing oval. So I draw a ton of lines with the assumption that if I draw enough lines, eventually some of those lines are going to be correct. So that's the way I'm going to go. And you can see that you can see the mug through here. That's fine. The mug exists behind the chapstick. So just leave it be for now. This is the X-ray vision part. Okay, let's go back to the mug now. So if we look at the mug, you'll see that there is a little line along the rim. There's a line along the bottom. So I'm going to draw another oval that is the same as that top one, but just below it. So it's like there's one oval here and one oval there. This bottom oval is going to be the rim. And there's the same thing for the base. So I'm drawing another oval over top of that one. For the chapstick, there's a whole series of circles in here. I'm going to draw a smaller circle in the center, and I'm using, this is the center line of the chapstick. I'm using the center line to be short. Everything is centered on that. And there's the lid of the chapstick, so I'm going to go ahead and draw another circle. You're going to have a lot easier time with your arm by drawing a full circle than by drawing just half of a circle. So that's the biggest reason that we're doing the see-through thing, the X-ray vision thing, because it's just going to make it look so much more convincing. I'm going to go ahead at this point now, and I'm going to sketch in the handle of the mug, but you can see that I'm just using a ton of lines because the first lines are not going to be the right lines, and the more lines that you have in here, the more that you can say, oh, I like those lines better. They look more correct, and then I can draw them darker, but I kind of sculpt it out. That was all with my 2H pencil. At this point, now that things are built out, you can go in with a darker pencil. You could also go in with an eraser if you wanted to, but for the sake of this, I would say just leave a lot of those lines. They actually, I think, make it look really cool. I'm going to use my HB and then move up to a 2B. So I'm moving from lightest to darker. And I don't want this video to take forever, so I'm just going to kind of keep it as brief as possible. With the HB, I would lightly begin from this whole mess of lines that we've drawn. I would use the HB to darken up the ones that are the ones that I want to commit to, and leaving the other ones. I feel like they add some value and depth, so I really don't mind them. You don't need to erase them, but if you really just freaking hate them, you can obviously erase them. But when I do this, that's when I can start getting into details like the rim of the cup, it juts out a little bit. The mouth of the cup also juts out a little bit. And this is going to be the lip of the cup. So the lip of the cup, when it turns the corner here, there's still a bit of a raised indentation on the other side, so I'm just going to suggest that. And then this is the mark of the rim, I believe, and then this is going to be the base. You can see that I'm just sketching it in a darker pencil line, but I'm not pressing down as hard as I could. And when I get to some marks, for example, like here's the mark of where this is the contour of the mug, and here is the area where the handle meets the contour. I'm going to think about things like, which one of those lines do I want to make more dramatic? I personally would prefer to make a contour line that shows that something is meeting the outside world. I prefer to make that darker and make it lighter when it's two surfaces meeting that are close together, because it makes it look more dramatic. So it's a bigger shift if it's the object and not the object versus two places in the object meeting each other. So I want to make dramatic stuff darker, less dramatic stuff lighter, and so on. You would build it up with the HB, and then you would move on to maybe a 2B or even a 4B eventually, depending. And the areas that you really wanted to add that drama to, you would use your darker pencil. So I want to show that the lip of the mug it's a pretty dramatic shift. So I'm going to use from being the actual mug to just being an empty spot inside of the mug. So I'm going to use my 2B pencil there, and I'm also going to use my 2B pencil here at the bottom of the mug. I'm probably going to make that as dramatic as I possibly can, because I want to show that that is the mug meeting the ground, which is an area of a lot of like contrast and drama. And then I can go ahead and add some darkness in other areas. You can see that I'm not making everything like uniformly dark. Like for example, on the handle here, I'm going to press down a little bit harder here, and then I'll lighten up. Because the more variation that you can add, the more interesting it'll be. You can also go in and start to add in lighter lines that just show where there are different shapes. So like here are the different shapes that make up the shape of that handle. Here would be the shape of the rim. If you have texture or words or stuff like that, you can add that too. But I would probably add texture and words with a lighter line, because you don't want it to fight too much with the form. This is more about learning how to draw form. Okay, so that quick example of shapes that are mostly circular. Let's talk about shapes that are more square. Shapes that are more square, just like everything else in our universe, are subject to the laws of perspective, and they're subject to the laws of perspective in a way that's even more, sorry about that, even more reliable than circles are. And we are going to talk more about perspective next week. Now, you don't need to understand all of the laws of perspective in order to draw it correctly. One of the basic rules, though, that you can always assume, and we can see it when we look at this image below, is that as things recede from you, the further away they are from you, the smaller they become. So that is the quickest and simplest way to say it. I'm going to go back to my 2H pencil, and I'm going to start to sketch this out, thinking about that. Now when I sketch this, I'm going to begin by sketching my larger object and then the smaller object that's on top of it, and everything's going to be see-through. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold up my pencil to my eye, my arm. Let's pretend my arm is all the way out in front of me so that it's a stable distance away from me. And I'm going to look at the image down below, and I'm going to measure to see what angle this part of the book, if you look at the cursor, what angle that's at. The first thing that I'm going to draw is that angle, and then I'm going to also try to find the angle of the spine. So without further ado, holding up my pencil helps me see the angles more clearly. I think that the angle of the top cover is something like that, and the angle of the spine is something like this. Now I'm going to hold up my pencil again. I'm going to find angle number 2. I close one eye, it just helps me see it better. Oh, it's kind of like that. So I'm going to say second angle is somewhere like this. Now when I'm drawing these lines, I'm letting them be longer than they might need to be, doesn't matter. And then I'll find the angle of the back of the book, which looks less dramatic than the angle of the front to me, something like this. Okay, so now I can already, and what am I doing? I'm trying to straighten it out. I don't think that my angles are completely correct quite yet. Now I'm going to, from there, I'm going to drop lines down from the 3 visible corners. If you wanted to, you could even drop a line down here, although we can't see it, it exists. From there, I'm going to sketch out the rest of the book, and just some tips. Going from back to front, this angle here is going to be smaller than this one here. However, here, this angle looks like it's pretty much the same distance here and here. So we just want to make it look smaller back here and a little bit bigger back here to give the illusion of perspective, which we will talk more about next week. And no, the book isn't square, but for now we're going to draw it like it's square just to keep things moving. And if we wanted to like pretend like it's completely see-through, you could draw those other lines. That would be the body of the book. Now let's move to the pack of cards on top of it. What I'm going to do to draw the pack of cards is I'm going to begin where I have a lot of reference points. So at this point up here, I can see that I can sort of say there's about that much distance from the spine of the book to where the cards begin. That's why my first line was this line that I dropped down. Then I'm going to make some other marks here. This is sort of looks like where this pack of cards ends on the book. And then there's this line here. And when I'm looking at this, that angle is really hard to see. So I'm going to just make a bunch of marks, and I'm really kind of guessing. The cool thing is that at this point it will be really easy to shift my angles around if they don't work out. Okay, so I drew the cards, and now what I'm doing is I'm trying to see if I draw the interior marks, if things are lining up. If you have not, or if it's been a while since you have drawn the classic drawing of a cube, which is this drawing here. This was very prominent on all of my middle school homework assignments, or just start drawing this guy here. This is basically, we are just doing different variations of this to try and measure out basically that all of these rectangle shapes to be sure that they look convincing. So I could see that when I first drew this angle was not lining up, neither was this angle. So now I'm going to just keep drawing lines until I think that things are starting to line up. Oops, that was my darker pencil. Okay, so when I'm drawing these lines, I'm keeping in mind that every line that's going in this direction, going down, I want them all to be parallel, which is usually the case unless you have something else going on in your drawing, but it's typically all these lines are going to be parallel to each other, so you could even use a ruler to draw them. And when it comes to the lines that are going diagonally, in general, the closer that they are to you, the bigger that they're going to be, and the further away they are, the smaller they're going to be. So those are just some basic rules of thumb. This I sketched out with the HB pencil, and if this was yours, you might want to spend some more time with it, but I don't want to right now. So although I recognize that this angle is not correct, doesn't look like my photo, I'm going to just move ahead because I don't want to take up a ton of your time. But you can imagine how you could fiddle with it. So I would move on to an HB pencil and sketch it out, defining lines so that the ones that I thought were the ones that I wanted to commit to were darker. And you could use a ruler to do this. When it comes to drawing books, I draw them first off as just square shapes, and then I'm going to say that that's the line of the spine, which means that I'm going to find where the binding meets the backing, and I'll draw in, these are the sheets, and we can assume that if it's a book that has pages that look like this, this back cover is going to also recede back towards that back edge, so you will see a little bit of it right there, and so on. And I'm going to go ahead and redraw that shape there too. And then, you know, you do more information on it than that, and then I will move on to a B pencil, and I will start to darken areas that I want to have more drama and contrast in. And again, if you're not sure where to add drama and contrast, add it where the object meets the ground, because that's an important area. You want it to look grounded. Plus, there's also a lot of contrast there, just visually. And when the object is closer to you, that is also an area that you want to have be more dramatic. So here, like with the spine, when the spine gets closer to me, I press down harder and then I let it lighten up as it recedes. And same for this deck of cards. I'm gonna, this edge that is closest to me is going to be the most dramatic edge. So here, and then, you know, there's the opening of the box. And so, you know, if you wanted to go ahead and draw the character on here, or a suggestion of some of the letters, you could do that, but you definitely don't need to for this assignment. So I hope those tips helped. Yeah, for this one here, I just want you to focus on trying to draw forms as much as you can. We'll be talking about perspective next week, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you make. Thank you so much.